make a cornice here today. This little guy is already covered with batting and interlining the frame. Thought I'd show y'all, if anybody's interested, how I do this. I've already marked top and bottom, left and right of my pattern, where I'm gonna center it, and then I can pin it right to my frame. Since it's covered already with batting and interlining, I'm gonna get it secure left to right first. I can pin as much as I want, and if I need to move it, it's easy to take pins out rather than staples. Okay, so now it's tight left to right. Now I'll start on top. Bottom. It's a little tight, so I'm going to loosen it. This is going to get self-welt and top and bottom, which will go on after the fabric is secure. I like to make sure this is really centered perfectly before I staple anything. And I'm looking at the pattern to see that it lands. I could feel the edge of the frame. So I'm checking to see that the pattern matches at the edge of the frame at every like spot. And then I also am making sure that the grain is straight and not stretched out of whack. And then last thing I do before I start is to look at it face on and then sideways, because a lot of things show up better sideways. If it's crooked, I can see it looking sideways, sometimes more than if I look straight on. And then one more thing on the end. I'm gonna pin it here. Checking the pattern. The same amount of orange is at each end. And I can pull and tug this to get it tight. Same on the other side. This is just a little cornice that's going on a French door over a shade. That's why the returns are a little bit big for how small this cornice is. But it has to fit around a shade. So I'm going to clip right here to release the pressure so that this fabric can wrap around the inside of the cornice once I get to that place. And then I'm going to do this side. Okay, I'm ready to staple. Actually, I'm going to cut a little bit of this away so it's not in my... The less, the better. But I leave still enough to wrap around the inside of the return. Both sides first, on the back. Then I like to do the top. This is the bottom. This is the top. And since it's going to get welt, I'm going to cut some of this extra away. If there was no welt, I could have just wrapped the dust cap with that fabric and been done with that part. Put the extra at the corner. This just goes really quick since I have the fabric pre-stretched and centered with the pattern. Don't even hardly have to think about it. I'm just smoothing it out a little bit with my thumb. This part we staple right into the plywood, the 1/2-inch face plywood. And most cornices are bigger than this, which means they're not so easy to pick up and flip around. So normally we would be leaving them on the table and stapling in this position. Well, the way I pin is that I already pull it snug enough and pin this way instead of down, because if you just get a little bit of that pin in, it will shift, but if you pin against the way it's being stretched, it doesn't really move. So the bottom goes this way and the top goes this way, and it is a good stretcher. It doesn't really let it go anymore. So it's all about the direction that you pin. And then I do slightly pull and adjust as I'm doing this, because I can see the grain and I'm keeping it really straight as I go. And I kind of jump around instead of starting at one end and going to the left to right or vice versa. I usually start in the middle and then go over here and then go over here and fill in the gaps. Have the returns to do, and then we add the welt. And you can see that I have a whole diamond in the center and half on top and half on bottom, so it's perfectly centered. And I just have this little bit here, but I'm going to cut away this extra right here first. It's just less in my way. That one's sticking up. It must have hit a previous staple. So I'm going to be careful just to cut off what's hanging over. So we'll use some of this right here to wrap the inside once the welt is on. Other end. Okay, now we're going to add the welt, and it's a self welt on top and bottom. And usually I like to make welt on the bias, but in this case I didn't like how it looked. So it's on the straight grain just like this fabric is. And what I want to do, I cut it in such a place where most of the orange is showing. If I would have made the welt, say, through here, then you would see more of this color. I guess that's a white, but I did it more through this section of the fabric, so it's mostly the orange. And I'm going to try to center it. so that the same orange section ends up at each corner. Right there. And then this one is in the same place. Same amount of orange over here, and then on this corner, same. Now that I have that kind of placed, I can just staple it. And I'm just feeling that the actual welt is hanging just over the ridge of this frame. You can kind of feel where that is. And this is kind of thick, so in the corner I'm gonna cut out a little triangle. Need some sharper scissors right now. Where it's going to turn. See that corner right there? You can kind of tell where that's the corner, and so I'm kind of cutting out a triangle of fabric right there. And then when I turn that corner, there won't be any fabric overlapping. And then I can cut off some of this extra. And I'm gonna open it. I wanna take out this welt that's inside and cut away some fabric and just clean this up and wrap it around the back. So I'm opening up the stitch enough to where I can peel it back and cut out that welt. And then I'm gonna cut down the actual fabric so that I just have a tiny skinny strip. Sometimes I staple it back here, sometimes I turn it and wrap it to the top. Depends on how thick it is. This is the little flap I had left from the face fabric. I think I'll staple that right there. And I like how this one feels up here. I'm gonna cut a little bit more of this away. And that will all get hidden underneath the lining. And that'll butt up against the wall, nice and clean. So we just have this other side to do. Sharp scissors help a lot, but I try to keep my sharp ones away from cornices because they end up getting dull if they run into a staple. That just cleans up really nicely without all of that fabric in there. I can staple it. I like to make sure I get a nice corner so it's not too tight. Like, I don't want to wrap it around too much because then it shows the corner of the frame, and I don't want to hang over too much this way or turn it too soon either. So I'm feeling for that before I staple it down. Looks pretty good. I'll clean up this corner and then we'll do the bottom welt. It's kind of a little pinch and tuck with this finger and then wrap it like that. Usually does the trick. Good. Now, same with the bottom welt, we want to center it so that the same orange on the bottom is in the same place it is on the top. And the bottom welt is already made so that there is a facing on the front of it. This is the back. It just has a little lip. And there's about a 3-inch facing that's going to wrap around to the inside of the cornice that will finish the bottom really nicely. So this goes on a little different than the top. The top just had the little lip, 1/2-inch lip. And we'll cover this with lining. Sometimes we cover it with the face fabric if it's going to be visible. This will not be, so it'll just be covered with lining. But the bottom of a cornice always needs some kind of facing so it will wrap around and clean up the edge really nicely. So you can kind of see how that pattern is centered over this pattern, each one. So now I'm going to lift up the facing and staple the little lip, this one, to the frame. And again, you can feel the edge of the frame so you know it's where it needs to be. And just to show you what happens next, this cardboard tack strip comes on a roll, will be inserted on top of that lip and stapled, and that gives it a nice crisp crease. But that's after we get it secure and in place. I'm gonna do the same thing here and release some of this extra fabric in the corner. I don't always do this, but this fabric is really thick, so it needs to be taken away. And again, corners are really important to get them creased really well. So I pinch this one until it's turned that corner really nicely, and then hold it in place, peel back the facing, and then staple it. And then I gotta make sure that this lip is right where it needs to be. And then continue the rest of the way. I'm gonna go to the middle to make sure I don't pull it too much to the left. And then get this one where it needs to be. And then fill in. And this part just takes practice to get to know how it feels when it's in the right place. Right here it's still loose. If you go up too far, it's going to hang over too much. And if you don't go over far enough, it's going to be right on top of that 1/2 inch plywood frame. So you want to just hang over right where the stitching line is. Okay, tack strip. Usually start on the right side and work that way when I apply this welt, and then also when I do the tack strip, just because I'm right-handed and it's a more natural feeling for me rather than this way, left to the right or in the middle. That's personal preference. So I just get it pushed into the corner as far as you can, and then make sure and pull this away so it gets all the way up until the welt, and then it kind of ends up being flush with the back of the cornice too. You want to keep it even because it'll show if it's not. I switched to longer staples at this point because now I'm going through all this fabric and now the tack strip. So I'm feeling right here to make sure it's flush with the frame as I go. And I don't know if you can notice, but I'm putting the staples in at an angle rather than straight, because most of the previous staples have been put in straight. So if I angle this layer, they're less likely to hit the previous staples and buckle. And then when I get to this end, I take my dull scissors and cut off the extra. Get that all the way in there. See how it looks before I finish the return. Now I just need to put a piece on each return. And I usually overlap the first one in the corner. Unless it's really, even though this is thick fabric, it still will lay nicely because I cut the bulk of the fabric out right there. Now it's ready to wrap the facing around to the back. And then we just need to line it. So this is all secure, top is secure. I'm just gonna lay it face down and then staple the facing to the back of the cornice. And I'm going up a little bit so that when I put lining on the back, some of this will show, so I don't want staples down low. All of these staples will be hidden with the lining. Every couple inches, and then I fill in the gaps, pulling slightly to get a tight fit around when it rounds that corner from the face to the back. I don't like any slack in there. So now comes the tricky part, the corners. I'm going to put away all the extra, or some of the extra, leaving a little bit that's going to wrap around the return. And I'm going to try to get the corner, I'm just releasing the inside of this a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm gonna continue to wrap the inside with the facing, and then this corner where the return is going back to the wall creates a fold right here, and sometimes it just falls into place where you can staple along here and then continue along right here. But there's a little bit of bulk right here that I want to remove, so it's kind of like wrapping a present. I'm gonna follow that fold and cut away some of that fabric on the inside all the way to the edge there, and then here, which is a little scary, but I can already tell from when I was folding it that I'm only cutting away what's going to be folded underneath. So now this is already folding better because the cut has released the pressure that the corner was creating. So I'm going to put a staple there, here, and now I can do the same fold I was doing before, but there's less fabric in here, and that wraps around, so there's not as much bulk in that corner, and it lays really nicely. And then I staple that. Turn it this way so I can reach. Okay, so now I have to clean up this part. So similar to what I did at the top for the welt is I'm going to open up this bottom welt to cut away the actual excess welt, and then we'll cut away some of the fabric. So you want to get it open all the way to the actual frame and then cut that away. And then I'm going to put a couple staples right here. And then cut that away. Seems like a lot to remember, but I pretty much follow the same steps every time I make a cornice, so it's really down to a science for me, and it's very repetitive, so I don't even have to think about it. I just do the same steps every time, and I get the same results every time. The only thing that's different is how bulky the fabric is, so sometimes it's a little more difficult than others, but same idea. So I trimmed away the extra that's going to be folded over, and I just do a little bit at a time because I don't want to cut too much away. So that's where I'm going to fold it and staple right there, but there's still a little bit more I can trim away. So now you can see I've gotten all the extra welt out, and I trimmed away as much as possible right there. So I'm going to turn it under, and then I'm going to staple right there. Keeping your fingers out of the way. Put one more there. Cut this. Sometimes I have to pin this part out of the way. So now this part, the facing that goes around the return, is going to wrap around and cover up these staples and this fabric that I just cut right here. But again, we have extra fabric, so I'm going to cut right here. And I know I don't need this much on the end, so I'm going to cut right there. And then I'm going to start folding and tucking to see if I still have extra, and I do. So I'm going to open it back up and cut more away. And again, this is the same method I do every time, so it seems like a lot of steps, but the more you do it, the faster it gets. Okay, I'm going to turn it this way so I can get in there. I'm going to release this some more. Turn that under, and then turn this under. Tuck these fuzzies under. I cut it really close just because it's so thick. I want to eliminate as much bulk as possible. Sometimes you need to pound it in. And then I can cut away this extra. And then another couple staples here. And then this part will cover up these raw edges. So again, I'm going to cut away some more bulk. And then this gets folded under. Sometimes you need to use your scissors for poking tools. Whenever possible, I like to wrap the inside of the returns with the face fabric instead of the lining. So now I secure that. A few staples. And then I can secure this part after I cut off extra fuzzies. Cut this down a little bit. part will all get covered with lining. Okay, let's see how that looks from the side. So this looks really nice and clean. Now we have to get this corner to look like this corner. And then it's ready for lining. Folding and tucking, and remove extra bulk right here. So I can feel where, and I can see which part is underneath. I'm gonna cut right there. And that just helps that part lay really nice. Little clip right here. Trim that out of the way. Open this. Trim away the bulk and the extra welt. I always make extra welt because it's better to have more than not enough. Don't need that. Don't need this. Folding and tucking. Fold in the inside of the return, pretty much the last step until we do lining. Tuck that little corner in there. And if some fabrics fray a lot more than this, you can put a little fray check right there to keep it from unraveling. Cut these little threads. I just like to get this all nice and neat before I do the lining. Okay, so now that's done for now. Thanks for watching.